how many of you have not done any Vipassana meditation? Okay, great. The very simple instructions here, we're not like going through a whole thing. So just sit if you're sitting, or I guess everybody's sitting, in a way that is relatively comfortable. In other words, you don't have to hold yourself really stiff in a certain position. But if you slouch so much, kind of like the slouching of the body kind of contributes to slouching of the mind. They work together. So in Vipassana, we just sit in a way that's relatively comfortable, relaxed, erect. Generally, we tend to meditate with the eyes closed, but that's not essential, especially if you're sleepy. You can have the eyes open, but not looking around, just kind of downcast. And just tonight, for just being simple, just as you're sitting here, take a breath and relax. And just let yourself feel your body sitting, not looking for anything, just relax and feel all the sensations that come of sitting, just feeling the body as it is. Just receiving in the attention the sensations of sitting. So just landing here, just as the body is. And then relax the mind, the heart. In other words, just let yourself just noticing however you feel. You're happy, you're sad, you're bored, you're sleepy, nothing particular. Not to be in a struggle or try to feel differently from how you feel. Just being present, feeling the sensations of sitting. Just recognizing, feeling the weather pattern in the heart, the mind. It's like this now. It's simple. And without a forcing, just as we sit quietly, you might very naturally begin to notice whatever sensations present themselves to your attention as you breathe in, as the breath goes out. Not looking for anything special, but just feeling the body, feeling the breath, to be present with relaxed attention in this moment. In this moment. We're not trying to make the moment different, but just feel the body. Notice the sensations of breathing. Receiving, you don't have to try. And of course, everything else happens, thinking, different feelings in the body, moods, sounds. That's all coming and going, that's fine. If you notice it, fine. But whenever you just feel lost and confused, just reconnect with feeling the body or the breath. Just in a very kind of relaxed way, like my tone of voice is. Just like this now. Like this now. So simple. But this is really just beginning to develop a little bit calmness, a little bit steadiness of attention, of awareness. So we'll sit for a few minutes. So we're not trying to have a particular experience, but just noticing what is arising in the attention. Using the breath or body to stabilize, but when you become aware, oh, attention's somewhere else, fine, as soon as you notice that, you're aware again of thinking or hearing. So nothing that arises need be a problem. But we use the breath, the body, just to help cultivate calmness. So you can keep on just noticing how your body's feeling as you open your eyes, the light. You don't just think meditation's just with the eyes closed and then we just blow it off. When we open our eyes, we stop being aware. But that's the challenge of a life of awareness. So I believe I said I was going to talk a bit about wise intention, something like that. That's what I'm talking about. It's a subject that from the Buddha's teaching, but it's very close to my heart, just as a part, a very essential part of daily life practice, daily life cultivating, purifying the qualities of our heart and mind from greed, hatred, confusion to generosity, non-greed, friendliness, compassion, but just as a way of bringing awareness into life. It's just been very, sometimes difficult, but profound, ongoing in my practice all these years. And, well, it's not new, but the way things are in the world these days, so kind of complicated and intense and troubling from whatever angle one looks. And we're finding I've been teaching intensive meditation retreats for years. And in the last some years, more and more people are coming than used to 30 years ago. 30 years ago, if someone said, "What do you do?" and I said, "I teach Buddhist meditation," that was the end of the conversation. And now it's more often than not, it's, "Oh, really? That's interesting. That's what I need to do." They have no clue, but they think that would be nice. But so more and more people are coming to retreats, and so something that comes up more is a kind of real... Anyway, the question comes up more frequently than it used to with a lot of oomph behind it, from people whose way of being in the world is more activist, which is great. Of saying, well, this is just sitting, and mindfulness is just being passive because we're just being with whatever occurs without trying to change it, to come to understand how the mind and body works. But it's a misunderstanding that Buddhism itself, or Buddhist practice, or mindfulness and awareness practice, is either kind of passive, not leading to action in the world, or like esoteric, self-centered. Because in meditation, in the form of meditation, which is only one aspect of our whole practice of awakening, right? But in meditation or on a meditation retreat, of course, it is very much, we're silent, we're really bringing attention to what's going on in our mind and body, like we just did here for 15 minutes, but for 2 days or a week or however long. And so you're just really noticing in yourself. And so the question comes up with a kind of a sense it's either or, and there's something missing, This isn't about action, it's just about going off in a cave. So this is we're talking about action and intention, and how I understand how the Buddha spoke about it. It's all I can do. It's so fascinating, but also central, key, because it's where they come together here. The Buddha said one time that a wise person is known by their actions. It is through the activities of one's life that one's discernment, one's wisdom shines. And you can see from his own life, after he woke up, when it was enlightened, whatever, and his tendency, for a while he thought, well, maybe it's too much trouble going around trying to explain this to people, so I'm just going to hang out in the bliss of nibbana. But luckily, compassion came to the forefront, and that's what we'll talk about. And he spent 45 years, very active years, teaching, starting to lay people, to nuns, to monks, to rich people, to poor people, to anybody who really wanted to learn. A very active, busy life, motivated by wisdom and compassion. So I just want to talk about that tonight, how that manifests in our practice and how we can work with this using the mindfulness practice. So, as the Buddha said, It's through the activities of our life that one's discernment shines, through action. But the key point here is, what is he talking about in terms of action? What does he mean in action? Action of mind, action of speech, action of body. And so many of you may be familiar with this way he speaks about it, but I'll just go into it some. I mean, for me, without having studied or practiced this, a common sense of action is just what we do. And the tendency to evaluate, was it good or bad or kind or whatever, is often from the results. You know, does it get the desired results? It was a compassionate action because you're trying to help somebody, you said the right thing, whatever. That's what we can see. That's what we tend to evaluate as action. But what the Buddha said is very different. He said, actually, the heart of action, what gives it its wholesomeness or its unwholesomeness, its onward-leading kind aspect or its suffering aspect, is not so much the result, which may or may not be in our control, but it's the motivation, the intention in the mind, in the heart, that gives rise to that particular action. That is actually the seed. Karma, you've all heard the word karma. Karma, it just means action, actually, just action. And the Buddha said, intention is karma, I tell you. Intention is the seed of the action. So intention can be just a little kind of energetic movement in the mind that leads to, say, lifting my arm. There has to be an intention. I don't have a neon thought coming, now I will lift my arm, I am doing it out of kindness, you know, it's just, but technically, before every movement, there's this energy, this chaitana is the word in Pali, of intention that leads to the action, just kind of cause and effect, how it is. Nothing good or bad, it's just how it is. We're not going to notice that every time, of course, that'd make us crazy. And so the intention arises from other causes, and at any moment, there's all different qualities can be in our mind giving rise to that particular thought to move to say something, right? So lifting my arm, that's nothing but say I want to say something to a person. I could be doing it in a kind of thoughtless, offhand way. My intention is just kind of diluted. I'm not paying attention. I could be saying something out of kindness. I'm really trying to help them. I could be saying the same thing out of being really annoyed at their behavior. And I could say it being really annoyed at their behavior, but couch it in really kind language. You know? So like Ajahn Sucitto, who's a wonderful British monk in the Thai tradition, he talks about recognizing that with our actions there's intention and convention. I like this. So the convention is that we speak, if we're following convention, which no, I don't know if we do anymore. Convention is that you speak more or less politely to somebody, right? And he says, so you could follow the convention and say it with total malice, right? We can do that. Oh, I just want you to know that when you speak like that, everybody hates you. I'm saying this because I really want to help, you know? And we can think we can even be fooling ourselves with that. We usually don't fool the other person, but we can definitely be fooling ourselves. But you get a sense. That's a very simple, obvious example. But to me, this is the genius of the Buddha, because he's really saying in terms of what is bringing in more. Okay, so you'd have to know that in terms of when he talks about, and this is what we explore with our meditation practice and our life awareness practice, that the seed of suffering in our own hearts and minds is when our mind and heart is driven by some kind of obsessive greed, by anger, by ill will, by hatred, by total confusion, not recognizing what the heck's going on, and so we respond in ways that don't match the situation. So again, he's talking about not that, then how we act. When we act from these qualities, we suffer ourselves. But this is to explore, not to take on board and believe it or not, but to explore. We suffer ourselves, and then the actions, the speech that come from those particular, when those are the particular mental states or heart states that are leading to it, also lead to suffering, although it's not always immediately apparent. And so this is where the Buddha is saying, really look and see. Our practice, where mindfulness practice comes together with how we act in the world, is when we start to and continue to be willing to have a look at, and we can't always tell, but have a look and see can I get a sense of what's going on in my heart and mind that's leading me to want to say this? Or after you've already said it. To me, I use speaking a lot because that's one that, for me, it's really easy to go off. Or writing an email, an answer email. That's another one. Or Twitter, let's not even go there. It's really easy to think, oh yeah, let me just say that, boom, and then I go back, I leave, and I can just kind of feel just yucky, and I have to, like when I'm teaching a retreat and I talk to maybe a series of 10 people over the day of what's going on with them, and I can go home and at night and I'll just have this feeling, and I have to kind of go through each interaction in my mind and just this is, and I'll come to a point where I can just feel, ugh. That was a little bit, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's not like you're lying, like I'm lying or saying, you're really hopeless or something like that. It just might be a little bit of impatience slipped out, which is aversion, which is ill will. Very subtle, And sometimes the other person doesn't pick it up, but they do pick it up, It could just be that little moment. But anyway, you go back and look in yourself. I look in myself, and I can feel, actually, the suffering. And this isn't done with any kind of judgment. If you're doing this out of clubbing yourself, then you don't want to look. It's looking to, and then we stop, really. So you're looking to see, oh yeah, when impatience is in the mind unrecognized and it comes out in a thought, even though it's a tiny little suffering, I suffer from that. And if I'm suffering from that, the other person also feels it, this sense of, interconnectedness. And this is really how the Buddha says, so our responsibility begins with really learning how, and this is a life practice, right? We're not talking about, okay, now I'm going to give up impatience from now on. It's over. Hurry up, right, and get rid of impatience. But it has to be this quality of we're interested to see, where's the suffering? Where's the peace? Where's the suffering? Where's the connectedness? Without judging. And then, when I say, oh yeah, that impatience, that caused us both to suffer, I'm more motivated, I'm more interested to notice it the next time. When it starts to come up in me, I'll feel it a little bit more, because I'm not trying to block it out. I'm really wanting to understand it. So that's just a simple example. I'm totally sidetracked here. That's just a simple example of how this works. And so it's like it can seem very self-involved and esoteric when we're not used to it. Go through life looking at every motivation. Of course you can't do that. It makes you crazy. And towards the end, later, I want to just offer some way that's been really helpful for me just to help keep tuning into it from time to time through the day. But just starting to look and see that it's not about how the action looks, but about what's the quality when we act. And being really understanding and patient with ourselves, because a lot of the time, and I mean bigger actions, not just lifting my arm or twitching my foot or something, but saying things, doing things, we're not used to noticing the intention. And so our old habits can come up just really quickly. And so be patient with ourselves, but be willing to, like I said with the impatient thing, to then notice afterwards, to just reflect on it and see. A simple kind of habit that can come up for me with answering emails. You know, you have a whole, and one email comes in and there's something of, I go, and actually there's anger. And I really don't quite notice and go, I can't believe they said that. But let me just write this answer, and it feels so right. It feels so, I'm just telling you the truth of how things are. This is really how it ought to be done, right? And now I'm learning there's a little subtle energy going on that if I would take the effort to look, I might notice it. As I'm writing that email, I can't believe it. But I'm not saying I can't believe how stupid you are. I'm saying, this is really how it is. Have you ever done that? And then if you can just pause and not hit send, and look at it the next day, and this happened to be the next day, it's like the anger's gone. And what I thought in the moment, I wasn't completely spaced out. I really thought that I was just being very clear and direct and just offering, some accurate information. I look at it the next day and I can just feel it dripping with anger, right? So it's like even when maybe you guys are better, but better, not better, worse, more accurate, more tuned in. But even when I'm a little bit attuned to that, it's so easy for the habit of what feels familiar to come up. And so we just start to, if you begin to explore the power of the quality in our heart mind when we act, the power of intention to bring ourselves into suffering or ease, to affect others in a unwholesome way or a wholesome way, we just begin to explore it. It really can change us, but it's surprising how quickly the old habits come in. Like another simple example I wrote here, where the habit, so I can be walking in the city and not really quite aware. And if I see someone who looks really disheveled, a little out of it, kind of homeless looking, and I'm not really centered in myself, my first habit response is like a little bit fear. Little bit discomfort, and I'll just kind of, maybe cross the street, just cross the street. Okay, that's not like a horrible thing to do. But when I'm paying attention, when I'm really tuned in, I can feel, we can feel the discomfort in our body, in our mind. Not like I take the time to track it back, but I can just feel it like a sense of fear and wanting to get away. So even if you do that, do it with awareness. Really. Know why we're doing what we're doing, and then we're not just having to run on kind of habit, just responding to this, responding to that, just out of habit and thinking we're free beings. Really know. And then if I'm aware of that little bit fear, I can take a moment and look and see, well, do they really look? Should I be afraid and cross the street? Or no, I can go and give $1, or I can just walk by and say hello. We have the possibility to explore and see for ourselves what brings us more into a feeling of aliveness, awakeness, of kindness, of connectedness, what seems to perpetuate the sense of separation, of fear, of me and other. And this is really, again, not a should, but look and see for ourselves what's true. Because when the Buddha talks about the greed, hatred, confusion, why these are suffering, is really, in my experience, it's what creates and perpetuates that sense of me and others separation. And when there's separation, there's fear, and there's neediness, and there's greed, and there's the whole world as we see it today. But it doesn't need to be that way. And in some ways, it really isn't that way. This is from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. You know who he is, huh? Have you read that the book with him and the Dalai Lama talking about the Book of Joy? There's so many just lovely little lines in that. So is anyone who doesn't know who Archbishop Desmond Tutu is? You all know, okay, so he's So he, in this book, he's talking about an African concept called Ubuntu. And we teach the 3-month retreat with a Ugandan bhikkhu, Ugandan monk, Buddha Rakita. He's a character. He's very funny. Anyway, I was talking about this last year, and I mentioned Ubuntu, and later he came and said, Ubuntu, it made me so happy to hear about it. That's really how we see things at home, you know? So this is just Bishop Desmond Tutu talking about it. It says, a person is a person through other persons. Ubuntu says, when I have a small piece of bread, it is for my benefit that I share it with you. Because none of us come into this world on our own. You realize that in a very real sense, we're part of a very profound complementarity. It is the nature of things. You don't have to be a believer in anything. See, that's the part I love. It's not believing, oh, we're really all one, even though we keep acting from separation. It's the fact that the separation, the greed, the anger creates the sense of separation, and we can't recognize the complementarity. This is back to Bishop Tutu. You don't have to be a believer in anything. I mean, I could not speak as I am speaking without having learned it from other human beings. I could not walk as a human being or think as a human being except through learning it from others. We belong in this delicate network. It is actually quite profound. Unfortunately, in our world, we tend not to notice this connection until times of great disaster, which at least it can happen then. We find we start caring about people in Timbuktu whom we've never met and we're probably never going to meet, and yet we pour out our hearts when something happens. So, just that sense of, you know, the habits, the way we're all conditioned in different ways, depending on our culture and our background and all. But still, it seems like a great part of the wider culture does seem to be that, you know, anger gets you what you want, and we do need to be afraid of those who are different from us and want more of what people that, you know, have more than us have. It just seems to feed these habits. And so in some ways, beginning to trust enough to really bring our awareness to our motivation, and if we see we're about to act in a way that we can feel is coming from anger, hatred, fear, whatever, to just pause a minute, to see what it's like if that dies down and we could recognize, not even maybe don't recognize our complementarity, but at least we can act from non-hatred. You may not be to love, but just non-hatred, which is actually the way things are translated from the Pali language, which is the first Buddhist teachings were written down in. He's not saying love, love, love. He's saying the opposite of hatred is non-hatred. Some people find that quite dry. I find that really broad and vast and accessible. Non-greed. You know, maybe you're to generosity, but you're just not coveting, you know, your neighbor's things. That's something, that's huge. That's opening up the possibility to recognize our connectedness. So we start to see that the habits begin to shift, because what is actually, and I've appreciated this more and more in these last years of my practice, it just seems like you just keep learning more and more. It never really comes to an end. I love that about the whole practice of insight and awakening. There's just always more to understand. And so what is the wonderful thing? My brain pills, I started taking these brain pills, but they haven't really kicked in yet. Oh, yes, okay. The really cool thing is, just what I was saying from Bishop Tutu, the habits may be that sense of fear or needing to protect ourselves or separate, that may seem the more normal. the more usual, the way things are. And sometimes when we talk about wanting to have a sense of unification or a sense of oneness, I think, well, that's got to be some amazing psychedelic experience that's in some other realm. But what we start to see is actually the mind, the heart, really prefers the wholesome. It's more pleasant. And we always like pleasant, don't we? That's just the way it is. We think getting stuff is pleasant, but actually, non-greed is far more pleasant. And I don't mean in an intellectual way. That the more we just tune into not acting from impatience, we're happier. So it's like we'll still forget because the habits are strong, and every moment they're being cultivated by so much in the society and in the media. But we don't have to have an equal amount of moments of wholesomeness, of kindness, of beauty, because it's so much more onward leading. It's really a more accurate reflection of the way things are. We can't so much think our way into it. Thoughts can kind of support us to really look and see for ourselves. But this is really where the mindfulness practice comes in, is like really feeling it, really noticing how it is when you act from greed, noticing it coming, noticing it acting, noticing the effects. How it is when you don't. How it is when you're generous, really noticing all of that. It's not easy. The Buddha talked about his teachings going against the stream of society, against the way things are, just against, and I'm sure, well, even I've been really fortunate for many years. I don't just live in meditation centers, but I know many, many people who are, that would be death, believe me. But many people who are really committed to awakening to a path of just cultivating compassion and kindness and generosity and honesty and all of that. So it's not, but even so, just going out into the mall or into the city or reading the papers or whatever, that isn't necessarily the primary way that society talks to us. And so it's really so, the other influences come in so quickly and so subliminally, and we're so used to it that we really don't notice. So it really is kind of against the stream. Thich Nhat Hanh said once, he said, don't let yourself be colonized by society. Right? I love that. But this takes not aversion, but real awareness. What does that even mean? What does it mean when I see some advertisement or go in a store and go, oh, I really need that. Those shoes are out of fashion now. I really need, I maybe don't think that, but just it creeps in, And there's nothing wrong with buying new shoes and I'm not saying that, but noticing how when we saw, and it's so ever present, or in little ways, or not so little ways. A story of a friend of mine. Well, something we had been talking about, and I won't go into any details, but it seems sometimes in society or in the news or on the Twitter, it's like whoever gets the most angry and the most vehement, it's like that means they get what they want, and then people start to believe them. And if you not believe, then just get angrier, and then people believe you. I know that's not always that, but it seems a little bit. So a friend had a very unpleasant experience with some co-workers, and I won't go into details, but she was doing a real estate deal, and these other people had done a very tiny little bit, and she's always really hard up for money. So this deal, she had done most of the work and was going to earn most of the money, and she thought, well, I'll offer these guys 25%, which she thought was incredibly generous. And I know this person for years. She's one of the most generous people and great integrity. So she's saying, I think it's really generous offering them this. So she offered it, and they got furious at her because they wanted 50%. She's like, 50%? So anyway, they got angrier. It went to a whole thing, an arbitration, and she was so suffering. And the whole time she was looking, am I just being greedy? Am I acting out of integrity? And really looking at it, and everyone she talked to who knew her said, oh no, you shouldn't even give them 25%. But they kept ramping it up and more angry and more angry, and it's kind of like this. And she and I were talking, said, yeah, that's right. It's like they think if they get angry enough, then that means they'll get it. And she ended up giving him 40%. She said 50% I felt out of integrity, actually, to just go along with anger because it's unpleasant. Because it was really unpleasant. She just wanted the whole thing over. But she said, but that would actually be out of my integrity because I did 95% of the work. But, okay, I'll give him 40%. Because that gets it over. And I got clear I never work with them again. And that was a gift to learn that now. So, but just the kind of sense, we were both thinking, wow, it's just kind of how things work. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's not a new saying. So, against the stream, really this looking at what's going on in my own mind and heart. How do I want to speak? How do I want to act? And it doesn't mean, people will come and say, yes, you're acting with so much generosity. I'm going to drop my anger and go with it. It doesn't work like that. It's hard, for us. So that's why our responsibility is starting with ourselves and taking the time to pause and look. And the more we come to, if you do, this is to look for yourself. Don't believe anything I say. But the more that I've come to feel, if I act out of integrity, or just, it just feels so awful, so out of alignment with how things are, that I just can't hardly do it. Stuff coming out of my mouth, okay, that's sometimes too fast. But actually acting out of integrity, doing something hateful or stealing, it's like just, you don't want to do it. Even though it doesn't mean, this is the thing about when the Buddha says, the heart of action is intention. It may or may not, our action, have the desired result. Sometimes we can say something really with very good intention and it impacts someone in a way that's painful for them. So we didn't know that when we started, but part of wisdom is really noticing the effect it has on a person. So the next time you bring wisdom to the kindness and you know not to say that. Or it could be like my friend offering 25%, and they're just, the other people are just lost in their anger, and that's not going to change. Still, I really respected her saying, I can move some, but out of my own integrity, I can't feed the anger by saying, yeah, you get what you want. So it's an interesting dynamic. It may not make things easier in the big picture, but we totally affect one another. So another story of that, maybe you heard this, the NPR podcast Invisibilia? You know that? Do you know the one story they told a couple years ago on, they're talking about non-complimentary behavior? Oh, it's a great story for this. I'm not saying it's like a, big spiritual, but just, you never know. So the two families, and it didn't say where, it sounded like it was in kind of country suburbs somewhere, were out in their backyard, a distance away from their house and kind of woods around. They had tables out there in the evening and they were having a little meal together out there with some wine and some food. And suddenly, out of the forest or whatever, came a man with a gun. Just from nowhere, he came a gun and held the gun and pointed at one of the people and said, give me your money. And they're like, freaked out, of course, and said, we don't have any money. We're out here. Because they didn't want to say, yeah, come in the house. They said, no, we don't have any money. And he was really threatening with the gun. So first they're like, well, what are you doing here? And one person said, what would your mother say if she could, see you? And he goes, oh, well, I don't have a mother. And so they were going kind of the standoff. And suddenly it just occurred to one of the people to say, would you like a glass of wine? And he's like, oh, okay, I'll have a glass of wine. So he took a glass of wine. He says, I want to have a seat. So he sits down. He's having a glass of wine. The other people, they're kind of having a nice little chat. I don't know how nice the other family, but anyway, they're having a chat and they're there for a while. And then he says, I can see I've come to the wrong place. Very nicely. So he gets up to go. He said, can I have hugs? He wants hugs. And then he goes to leave. He said, can I have another glass of wine? So they give him a glass and he goes. They, of course, I mean, they're not crazy. They ran into the house and locked the door. And then later, when they went out, they found he had finished his wine and left the glass very neatly right by the door and gone away. So you never know. I mean, another time that might not work. But we don't know the effect of not just because anger comes, fear comes, that's the only way to respond. You know, not that we always have a choice, but just to put it in, sometimes we do. So in terms of, having to move along here, in terms of working in daily life, too, with how do we even remember to notice our motivation? As I said, you're not going to notice it every moment. Or how to bring it in a broader way. In English, different from the Pali word, the intention I'm talking about, that momentary one, chaitana, is very momentary. But we also, in English, can use the word intention or motivation as our larger aspiration, right? A sense of, in our life, a direction we want to point our life in, or a way that we want to live, or a sense of purpose. And sometimes this is spoken of more in the commentaries in the Buddha as a kind of overarching way to work with our moment-to-moment motivation intention. And it's something that I personally have found really helpful and accessible. So it's a sense of tuning in for yourself, you know, when you're kind of quiet, so that's not superficial. See, well, what's the most important to me? I mean, don't go crazy, you know. And what's the most important thing to me? What's really my deepest aspiration? And it could be anything. You can't, you know, don't make a should or what sounds good or something comes up and you go, oh no, that's too superficial, you know, whatever. Or on the other way, that's too profound. Who am I to have such an aspiration? I'm just, you know, a low-level jerk here. It's like, really look and see. What's really, and that can change over time. And it might be to be the best parent that you possibly can, whatever that means. It may be, when I first kind of began to work with this in my own life, so this is personal, but it had come up years ago. I had been doing a lot of meditation retreats, and I was on staff at the meditation center. I was a cook there then. Just doing my thing. It came up very deeply suddenly. I just want to serve the Dharma and share the Dharma. Who knows what that meant? And the next thought, which is the habit of mind of self-denigration, was, who do you think you are? And what would you do? Don't pay attention to that one, you know? That's just habit. So you let whatever the aspirations, whatever it is, come up. And here, I'm assuming it's wholesome, not, you know, I'm going to rob as many banks as I can and get rich and show them, you know, or I'm going to go out and get vengeance. But that may be, you got to be honest with yourself, right? So here I'm talking in terms of cultivating the wholesome, cultivating the beautiful. But starting by tuning into that doesn't mean everything we're going to do, you know, is in that direction. But it can serve as a really supportive, kind of like a lighthouse, a beacon, you know, a sense of, one teacher said once, it wasn't a Buddhist teacher, but I've remembered this line forever. In every moment of activity, you're committing to something. The question is to what? It's sort of like looking at what's the moment. This, actually, I think I'm committing to loving kindness, but really, I'm coming from, I want to feel comfortable. That not be bad or good, but just how many moments is the choice I make about wanting to be comfortable? I hate to tell you how many moments that's the choice. That's not evil, but what if the choice is between doing something that might be helpful, you never know, but it might be, or being comfortable. And I keep making the choice to be comfortable. So having the conscious aspiration, believe me, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this and teaching retreats if I hadn't had that aspiration back then in a space that I was really willing to keep tuning into it. Because many, 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 and maybe Never mind, that's my self-negation coming in. Many, many, many of the choices I had to make are definitely not in the direction of being comfortable. And we all know that. To really give up something pleasant or comfortable or that we'd like now in service of something greater. I'm not a parent, but I see how it is to be parents. You're giving up all the time, in service of love, I'm assuming, love of your children. I was watching, just getting off the plane today, I was just sitting there a minute, and people getting off the plane before I got on. And so a couple got off, and the woman had like a little baby here, and they had maybe a 3-year-old daughter, and they're coming off with all the paraphernalia and this, and trying to unload it and do this, and keep the little girl looking at books. I mean, it was like a major operation, you know. It went on for 15 minutes, and they were so, mellow and kind and doing. I thought, oh my God, traveling. This is like every moment of the day. I see when I visit my brother and sister-in-law, and they have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. My brother's not much younger than I. Your life becomes about that. And they're totally into it. It's beautiful. I see so much more love and generosity and openness in my brother than I ever saw. From this willingness, this love, this aspiration, this sense of purpose of just wanting their kids to be as good as they can be, to support them out of it. It's a beautiful thing to see. And there's many moments when, you're tired and you don't want to do it and you're cranky and all of that stuff. It's not about being some amazing person. But we all know that. Athletes know it. You have to give up a lot of things to be a really, I wouldn't know, but to be a professional athlete. I follow tennis. And the people who play professional tennis, almost everything in their life is calibrated to support them to doing that, for whatever the motivation might be. So we all know how to do that. So having a sense for yourself of what's really your purpose, what's most important, and then seeing as, maybe just starting from big decisions. Do I want to do this? Nah, it'd be too much trouble. Oh, but it would really help my son, to learn how to do this. Okay, I'll give up my only spare night and go do this. And you do it maybe a little grouchy, but more out of love, more out of generosity. And so we can consciously use that again and again and again, this sense of the greater aspiration as a way to remind us to notice what choice we're making, not so much the effect, but where's it coming from here? There's a statement from Martin Luther King that I've always loved that says, do I have it here? I have it somewhere. Oh, here it is. Where it's really seeing the outer, his whole practice of nonviolence coming from Christian love, incredibly profound in action. But he was always so clear that where it begins is in the inner motivation. So just this one simple statement from him, Martin Luther King. Nonviolence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of the spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a person, you refuse to hate them. I love that. That one thing, that's a whole lifetime of practice. And many times you're going to shoot someone, but many times we're not going to be able to follow through. Fine. You notice why. You notice what happened. And then there's another moment. Another moment. We bring in our attention here. It's really, really profound. Let's see. I could go on and on, but I want to leave a little time for discussions or questions. I'll just... Mingyur Rinpoche, who's quite a wonderful Tibetan Dzogchen Lama right now. He says, our behavior, how we relate to the world around us, even with very difficult situations, becomes the most reliable means of protecting our mind, our heart, from anxiety and dissatisfaction. Our behavior becomes the most reliable means. Martin Luther King again. The ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy. But we can't do that from an act of will. I decided now I'm not going to revert to anger or fear. It's the practice, really. It's moment after moment of acting, in little ways consciously, so we're not just coming from the habit again and again. It's really that willingness to keep coming back. I heard, again, on NPR a couple years ago, a little interview with a man who had been working in prisons with young men in prisons and for serious crimes, and call it Interrupting Violence was the name of whatever program he was doing in the prisons. And I just heard this little snippet of the interview where he was talking with a young man who was in prison. Sounded like he was like maybe early 20s, late teens. And the young man said, it sounded like he was in prison for life for many, many years anyway. And he said, I so often, I wish I had back that 3 to 5 seconds where I acted from violence. That's all it takes. You know how it is? Boom, it just shoots up. So we not that we're going to be perfect, but that willingness, okay, I can't just decide now I'm going to act from bravery. No, but the willingness to see the fear, to just meet it, to play with it. The willingness to keep looking at what's my aspiration. Help me make this decision now, that just to explore. And this is what our mindfulness practice gives us the tools to do. And so it's kind of like a balance. No, deep meditation practice can seem passive, self-involved, but then it moves out. It gives us the tools and the wisdom and the trust and the faith to move out into the world and act from wholesomeness. So I'll just end with this in the Dalai Lama. You all know who the Dalai Lama is, right? He gets up early. First, he goes to bed early. But he gets up early and he practices 4 or 5 hours every morning. And you know how busy he is, So he said once, in the morning I practice to quiet and calm my mind. The rest of the day I use that to serve humanity. I love that. That's kind of like the balance we can learn to work with, and this working with intention is just one avenue in action. So that's what I have to say about that. Thank you for your kind attention. So we have some minutes if there's any discussion or comments or whatever.
Do you have any advice on how to, during life, to notice mixed intentions?
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's how it is. Because it's a moment-to-moment thing, right? If you said, I'm working on a scientific paper over weeks or months, and I just had this one intention every moment, impossible. What you're describing is really, what I hear is like a sign of awareness, noticing how our mind and hearts work. It's changing all the time, really clear. So, it's not like you say, I want to do this to help things, but right now I'm just doing it to stave off unhappiness. Okay. But still, overall, it's not a bad thing to do, so keep on doing it. But be aware that you're staving off unhappiness. You bring in the awareness to it. If then you saw, I'm staving off unhappiness and the thing I'm doing actually isn't a good thing to do, it would be easier to stop. Of course there's mixed intentions most of the time. So don't make it a problem, I guess I would say. You're totally on the right track, just notice it. And you start to notice how much more inspiring it is, when it's wholesome. But we can't do it from an act of will. I'm going to feel inspired and generous every moment I'm writing this paper, fat chance. But yeah, that's great, exactly. Yeah. It's a sign just that the mind and heart is changing every moment, fast. That's why we can't just say, this is my purpose and everything I do is going to be in service of it. So we have to just, patience and wanting to learn, not to be perfect. Are there any disagreements? Usually there's like some argument about all. Not that I want argument, I don't like argument.
I really like what you said about the quote from Martin Luther King, I refuse to shoot and I refuse to hate. But what happened to him in the end, does that negate all of that?
Well, I can't speak for his heart and mind, right? But this is kind of like the hard lesson. No, I can only speak from outside. But that's kind of like a really clear example that he's still hating wouldn't have made that better. You know what I mean? That the sense of I refuse to hate, he refuses to hate, it's a sense of, again, I can't speak for him only from what I've read, but from how I can understand, that knowing that refusing to hate, it may end up as it did that he got killed. You don't know. But hating, it could also end up that one gets killed. But where one can start, the only place we can really start and then figure our actions is from within one's own self. Like I said, it doesn't mean that we get what we want. And it doesn't mean, and as we can see often, someone's kindness or purity can actually almost trigger reactivity in someone else who has a lot of anger or a lot of hatred, or just, it definitely doesn't, like I read that non-complimentary behavior, but I said that's not always what happens. And so it's really seeing not to define, this is what this teaching is about, I'm not saying what you should do, is not to define our motivations and our actions by what other people do, or what other people think, or even how it looks, but from our own sense of, kindness, integrity, nonviolence, whatever is the particular one for us, and then to carry that through in action as best we can. But it doesn't mean everything goes nice. Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about the concept of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's kind of related to intention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But is it just because I'm just so I can say, oh, I was being kind, or is it that something that I really want to do?
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's kind of where I'm thinking.
Well, that's similar to what I was talking about, the sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And in turn, of course, I'm a meditation junkie, but in terms of meditation, part of what happens as we're practicing, just looking, is that kind of stuff starts to get more obvious. Yeah. Like you'll see, to go back to your example, you start to see, I'm not saying this was you, but just you start to see the habits of your mind. You say something to be nice, and then you go, oh, but that wasn't really how I was feeling. I was feeling different. And we're just being aware of ourselves that starts to come out. And then you get a sense that, oh, I do really want to be kind. Or no, I think I ought to be kind, but really, it's false at this moment. And this is exactly what we explore. And so we're looking at, in sense of your deepest aspiration, purpose, even it could be a so-called, unwholesome one, but you have to really look with a sense, it's 8:30, they cut me off. I'll just finish this.
That's what we do in Switzerland.
Right. No, they're too polite in Switzerland. They never would. Yeah. So it's like you really look without a sense of should or right or wrong or good or bad, and you really start to see. And this is what mindfulness practice is. You're looking, you're just seeing, how is it now? What does it lead to without a judgment? And, reality reveals itself. That's exactly. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
I think one wants your purpose to be, one wants one's own purpose to be something grand.
Yeah, that's...
something really worth me clinging to and building over my life.
No. Get rid of that. Just kind of getting clear in yourself. What's most important to me? Being a little kinder every day. That is fine. It's whatever's really true for you. It doesn't have to be grand. If you're looking, it's sort of like what you were saying. If you're looking, it should be something that's unreliable. It's really looking just what's true for me. Maybe, and not even should be, maybe my purpose is to just get through life with a little more ease. That could be a purpose. Of course, being the good Buddhist that I am, if you really want to go through life with more ease, you end up cultivating, also. But anyway, it's to be totally honest, just in yourself, not what anyone else thinks, no should. Just really see what's true for you. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Okay, thank you all, really. It's been lovely being here with you all. Thanks a lot.